news being reported today that Attorney General Eric Holder has announced the opening of a new front in the battle for voting rights, or at least so he says, his brand, which is rather ironic because this administration, and particularly the Attorney General, the Department of Justice, had talked about, in essence, how the Supreme Court had eviscerated the Voting Rights Act and just rendered it basically by its terrible decision. And yet, if you look at the words of the Supreme Court in that decision, the Supreme Court points out that the factual data does not bear out the attacks by this administration continuing on the states who had done wrong, if you will, sinned back 50 years ago. There was racial discrimination in this country at the time of the Voting Rights Act. And there is racial discrimination today, but it has moved. The Voting Rights Act has accomplished a great deal in our efforts to move toward equalization or equality of opportunity around the country. And so it has accomplished something that is very good and very important to the country. But amazingly, when the Voting Rights Act was extended, and with support from people on both sides of the aisle, they decided that, gee, since some of us have districts where there's now racial discrimination, even though at least 6 of the states that were originally gone after in the South by the Department of Justice, they had better racial equality in voting than the average for the entire country. And yet, this administration decided our goal is to punish those states that did not vote for this president. We're going after these states. We're going to continue to punish them. We want to continue to be punitive to them. We're going to ignore areas like Massachusetts, where there's now racial disparity than in at least 6 of the states, maybe all of them in the South. But as I understood it, Massachusetts, unfortunately, has moved into the arena of being a state that has significant, most significant racial disparity. And yet, the Voting Rights Act did nothing to address those areas of the country where over the last 50 years, discrimination has grown, it's raised its ugly head, and yet this administration said, no, we're too busy punishing states who corrected their problems and are doing so much better than the rest of the country. Why? Because we can. And actually, that is the reason the Voting Rights Act was extended without the Gohmert Amendment, that would have made sure that the Voting Rights Act applied across the country in any area where there was racial discrimination. But in a bipartisan manner, a majority forced the extension for 25 more years, which would mean, now I don't even recall who all was in office back when I was a little kid. I didn't know who was discriminating and who wasn't. I had no part in it. And people who had no part of the discrimination that was going on back then, the discrimination that needed to be addressed, the discrimination that needed to be corrected, for some reason have people in a majority of places that voted to extend it, keep punishing areas that are no longer committing wrongs, no longer. We want to keep punishing them because if we open it up and apply these same punitive things across the country and come up with a new formula, gee, we're not going to be able to keep punishing these areas for their sins of 50, 60 years ago. We may have to punish our own states because racial disparity has grown there. So the Supreme Court did the proper thing, legally, fairly, and now we see this administration saying, oh, it turns out we can use the Voting Rights Act to continue to punish Texas. Why? Because we can, because we want to. And so they're coming after Texas, as announced today, again. And, you know, at some point, I hope we get to the place that the president spoke of when he spoke at the Democratic Convention, so eloquently talking about there's not a red America and a blue America. We're just Americans. I love that speech. I thought it was fantastic. It caused me to rise up and take notice. Wow, this guy's saying the things I believe in. He's so right. And yet his policies have been diametrically opposed. They have racially divided us, continuing to go after political enemies, continuing to have the administration, this administration's Internal Revenue Service, weaponized in a way that Richard Nixon and Lyndon Johnson could never have even dreamed they could have done. So the court to which the administration has gone in Texas will do the right thing. Say, no, you know, Mr. Attorney General, we remember your comments about how you don't have the power really to do this anymore since the Supreme Court struck Section 4 down. And so either we believe what you're saying now or we believe what you said out there after the Supreme Court decision. And that becomes a real problem when you have an Attorney General that says different things to different people. Because the highest law enforcement officer in the country needs to be trusted. He needs to have respect and adherence for and to the law. We have an Attorney General that's been held in contempt. He's been in contempt of Congress. He's been in contempt of the law. He's been in contempt of the actual facts repeatedly. We need a different Attorney General. I asked President Bush to appoint a new Attorney General when there was a scandal over national security letters. I thought it was an appropriate thing to do. When someone's credibility is hurt, even if they didn't even know it was going on, it's time to have new leadership and change what's going on. And we got a new Attorney General. Yet I'm amazed at how my friends across the aisle keep clinging, and as does the President, to an Attorney General who is in contempt of Congress, in contempt of the law, and in contempt of facts. An Attorney General who would have the nerve to testify that he's never even heard of someone attempting to prosecute a reporter when he knew, as he said it, he had okayed and given his blessing to the persecution of James Rosen with Fox News. So he either lied to the to the Congress in his testimony, or he was a part of a fraud upon the court. Because the allegations in the affidavit and the application for a warrant before the court going after James Rosen claimed he had violated the law, set out the law he had violated, that he was a flight risk, that he was a risk to destroy evidence. So either he believed the things that he approved, or which means he lied to Congress, or he spoke truthfully to Congress and committed a fraud upon the court. Either way, we need the highest law enforcement officer in the land to have more credibility than that. And yet here he is doing the same thing, saying one thing, one place, claiming another in another place. It is